All right, so the next step that I actually forgot in the previous video is before we can actually pull this into the game, we need to set up our assembly definitions. So that is for each asset scripts under each folder. Main thing is the assembly Valheim itself. We're going to name each assembly definition what the folder name is. And then we're going to reference in the assembly Valheim every other script that we have, and then we're going to jump into the utils and reference GUI utils as well. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to jump to the first one that I see here, which is assembly underscore Google Analytics. You're going to right click, say create, and you're going to go to assembly definition. So same thing, name it the same as the folder. So assembly underscore Google Analytics, and hit enter. So jump back to your scripts folder, go to the next one, and GUI utils. So same step, create assembly definition. You're going to do this for each one of the folders that you find. And to make this fast, I would do a assembly underscore, and then just Control C that and copy it. That way you only have to type the physical folder name. So jump back to scripts. We're going to go into Lux. You're going to potentially get some errors during this step. That is because it's slowly starting to reference things. Just ignore them for now until we're done. So assembly Lux. I am now in post processing. So create assembly definition, paste post processing, and simple mesh combine, create assembly definition, simple mesh combine. Same thing for Steamworks. And at this point, a lot of your errors should slowly start resolving. And always make sure to click in the white space. You don't want to add anything accidentally to a potential folder. All right, so once you're done, you'll notice that there is no errors once everything references, and I just lied. We get a camera effects post-processing error. Doesn't exist in Unity Engine. We will potentially fix that. So what this is that it's still trying to reference post-processing. So create an assembly definition for each one. Now we need to go to assembly GUI utils and reference assembly utils. So assembly GUI utils, go here, click on your assembly definition that you created, okay? And we're going to assembly definition references, click the plus.
Test. Test.
We can hear you.
Oh.
And then go to, now that we're in GUI utils, we actually need to reference utils. So actually, let me cancel that. I'm going to jump to it on the side here so it doesn't complain like it just did. Which is clicking the folder in this project window versus trying to navigate. And we're going to just drag this assembly definition in here. So we have that referenced. That should hopefully fix some of these errors. We're going to click apply, clear out. It does not look like it's doing so. Does not exist in namespace. Post-processing, Steamworks. Okay, so I actually know the issue here.
You have to do it for each,
it's
no?
It's the final step. So these errors here is because we haven't finished our assembly definition references for assembly Valheim. So the assembly Valheim definitions need to reference all of the others. So that's what these errors are for. I just wanted to make sure that that is what this is for. So just keep clicking the plus. I forget exactly how many assemblies there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So click the plus 8 times. Make sure you have roughly 8. 6, 7, and 8. So the fast way to just get these in here, my bad, these are constraints. I clicked the wrong pluses. So you need the assembly definition references here. So 1, 2, 6, 7, and 8 of these. So it's going to complain if we try to navigate like it did just a second ago on us, if we try to navigate to the folders this way. So the easy way is to click on the left-hand side here and just click Google Analytics, and then just drag that one in. GUI Utils, drag that one in. It's also twice as fast, by the way. Lux, post-processing, simple mesh combine, just drag all of these, Steamworks. Okay, sun shafts, and then utils. So now it's probably going to give us the prompt, but I'm going to go ahead and hit apply down here in the bottom right hand corner once we're done with that. And that should, cross fingers, fix our errors. And it looks like it did. All we have is warnings. As I mentioned, most of the time warnings don't really matter unless it's directly related to a mesh that might be a little bit too complex. Alrighty guys, so once we have everything set up and referenced, make sure that the assembly Valeheim, you should have 8 references here. Do not reference itself. Make sure assembly Valeheim is not in this list. And then under GUI utils folder, the assembly definition here should reference utils. So that is a different folder, is assembly_utils on this left-hand side here. Once you have those references set up, you should have roughly 7 warnings. You can ignore them, just clear them out, get rid of them. Everything should be fine. The step that I recommend doing at this particular point is right-click, show in Explorer, so we can jump straight to our project. I'm going to jump to what is probably your Valeheim folder or whatever you named your folder. I'm going to jump one level higher than that. So now, this is where I recommend you back up everything. So we don't get any file permission errors. We're going to close out of Unity. So right click on this folder, say send to compressed folder. That way you have a backup of this, whatever you need. So this is, if you have any issues with your project, let's say you accidentally deleted something, you can't get it back, you messed up some of the references, you did something wrong in general, or you want to create a completely new project that has different assets in it. Maybe that's what you want to do. This is how you would do it. You'd have a clean asset rip. You'd have all your assembly definitions defined. You'd have all your scripts and everything set up and all your project and everything set up for you. So you won't have to worry about doing it again. This is a very good thing to have. Your shaders and everything are set up as well, so all of that crazy stuff that we just spent a while doing, this is done for us if we ever mess up. So you don't have to redo that if you mess up your entire project. Alrighty, everybody. So once it gets all zipped up nice and neat for you, this is your backup in case anything happens. We have our Unity project here. Open in a new file explorer. I have mine pinned to quick access, but this is your default Valeheim game installation, usually found in Program Files, x86, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Valeheim. So this is where we want to start setting things up for our particular project for our code. So once we get these referenced, set up, and ready to go, we're good to go. Okay. So one of the things that we need is make sure that your Dickinson's Bepinex Valeheim pack here is just in a folder off to the side. You can have this in a different file explorer. It could be down in the corner, wherever you want. But as long as you have it displayed on your screen here. As you can see, I have a thing here called Assembly Publicizer. This is going to help us with our code portion, not related to the Unity portion. You can go grab this at this URL here. It's cabbagecrow/assembly publicizer. You're going to click on the releases on the right hand side. You're going to download the zip. You don't want the source code or anything like that. Just download the zip, extract it, get a nice little folder. Okay. Once you get to that particular portion and you're ready to go, I'm going to close out like downloads and whatnot. So we only have these 2 file explorers. So I've already done this step, but once you get it extracted, you're going to have the assembly publicizer here with the DLLs and hopefully the application in the exe. So the exe is really what we want. The exe is going to allow us to, within code, with all the DLLs that we have that we're going to pull from the game, it's going to turn any methods that might be private or internal to the DLL and expose those for us and turn them, quote, public. That allows us to latch into it, program stuff for it, and even create Harmony hooks that latch into it as well. So all of this link and everything, I'm going to start providing in the video descriptions as we go. So for each video that we come across, everything should be provided for you below. If it's not, please leave a comment. But we're going to open up our assembly publicizer folder. You should see assemblypublicizer.exe. On the right-hand side, this is the default install of Valheim's game. We're going to go into Valheim Data, Managed folder. And just like what we did before, we want the assembly underscore DLLs. We want to have this open on our side here. This is going to help us set up the mod project template and reference everything A-OK. And as well as every single time the game updates, this just becomes easy. You're going to do this every time the game updates for you. So assembly underscore DLLs, you have to drag these one at a time. I've mentioned this in a previous video. But you can drag and drop onto the exe. It's going to pop up and say, make sure you allow unsafe code within your project. Use publicized library as your reference, so on and so forth. It gives you a little bit of output. Any key to exit, it creates this publicized assemblies folder for us over here on the right-hand side. You'll see a assembly underscore Valheim publicized. We're going to do this for all 9 of these files. So I'm going to drag utils here onto the exe, and I'll go ahead and skip forward so you don't have to watch this. All right, so you guys will not have all these additional DLLs on the left-hand side here with publicized assemblies. I've already done this once and downloaded it once. You're only going to get the application file. Just make sure it is the exe, and it does say the type is application. You don't want the application manifest, which I have in my case. You're just going to drag each one on it. If you do not get the prompt and it just goes away immediately, all it's saying is that we're going to need later to turn our project to allow unsafe code, and make sure that we have done that in our project when we get to the code portion. So for this video, I'm actually going to tell you how to create an asset and get ready to bring it into the game now that we have everything set up. So the big thing that we need to add here additionally for our code portion is this BepInEx pack. We want to make sure that we can reference this later inside of our default install of Valheim. So we're going to open up the BepInEx pack. We have the BepInEx pack Valheim folder here. And we want to grab all this. We're going to hit Control-C for copy, or you can right-click and copy. And we're going to paste it into the default install of Valheim. You will have to do this for every release of BepInEx. I recommend just wiping out this folder, republicizing everything, or at least saving the publicized. If the game did not update, you can keep the publicized folder and just drop it right back in here. BepInEx updates more frequently, so just make sure that you wipe this whole folder out, go for it, and drop it back in there. But if the game did not update, keep your publicized assemblies because you don't necessarily want to have to do that again. But I'm going to pause the video for a second, and we're going to skip ahead straight to the Unity. Alrighty guys, so once we're back into Unity, the more assets that you have and the more assets that you start to create, it won't load as quick. But we're going to jump back to our custom items folder, and we're going to create a new asset to bring into the game. In this case, we're going to bring in an item and get that ready. So we want to bring in, let's say, a new sword. Sword is a good example. It's very good. Meatware Monster made it in his other videos. So I'm going to say sword iron in this case. But I want the sword iron fire. I like the cool, crazy effects that it has on it. So just like we did before, Control D to duplicate. Drag this to your custom items folder and open up the prefab. So the Viking sword is the actual model, so you can click that and jump straight to it. If you notice, we have some of our shaders with a little bit of a issue. So this is part of what I'm saying with the standard ones don't always fix everything. So this comes from the effects. So the embers here, looks like these are A-OK, except for this shader here is not quite right. And that's because the rendering mode is not set to fade or transparent or anything like that, but we do have it set to a standard type shader. So what I would do here is particularly choose either a fade in this case, so we can see it kind of fixes it. Cutout is also a good one. Opaque is why we're getting the big squares, or you can click transparent and you can actually get something completely different. It looks a little bit better. So go through and fix some of your shaders if this does happen to you. So it looks like the smoke came in just fine, but this particular one right here, which looks like flames, this one did not come in too great, and we got to figure out why. So choose this as a fade or a transparent, and it looks a little bit better. As we can see, this is not red. This is not what we want. And if we bring in this asset, it will break the other sword if you were to duplicate this or forget to duplicate this and bring it into the game. It'll break it for everybody that loads your mod. So make sure that you set this to whatever you want and however you want. We're going to actually go jump back to the sword iron here and see if it's not broken on the default one. And it looks like it is. So this item particle standard is solid. We're going to jump to the Viking sword, and it looks like it's actually already set to red. So in our duplication process, we are editing this particular shader for this sword, and that's because we went in here. So what we want to do actually is undo what we did. Okay. So weapon, sword, fire. Here we have this glow. We had flames, and we saw that we changed the color here. We're going to want to change this back to white, and maybe even change this back to opaque. So that is so we don't mess up the default shader for this particular weapon. Okay. So Viking sword, we have the shader here. Weapons 1_fire. So weapons 1_fire. So we want to keep this particular shader, but for sake of not messing up the default game asset, we're going to duplicate that as well. Drag it into custom items. And in flames, the same thing. We have a shader here. It's a little bit pixelated. It's a little bit messed up. We want to find where this is and go to flame. We have this messed up asset. We have flame 2, flame large. Some of these came in great. This one did not. So we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to go in to custom items. We're going to drag that down. If we have flames 1, so it looks like that reference kind of okay, but it's still referencing the flame shader. We have the Nista, which looks like it fixed just fine. That references flame. This one references fog. Fog looks like it came in just fine. So we fixed kind of what this sword needs to reference. So we're going to actually make it reference our new shaders. So if we change these, we aren't changing the vanilla asset. So flames for this one, we're going to tell it to use flame 1. So you do that by just dragging and dropping. And we're going to fix our own shader. So we're going to say cut out on this. And for the other flames, for flame 1 here, we're going to also update that. And then we have flames local. This one is also referencing flames. We're going to tell it to reference flames 1. So these are getting a particular issue with, maybe the alpha cutoff or some other kind of issues. So I would either change these to transparent, which we can see doesn't look quite right, fade if you can mess with that, or even cutout. So cutout or fade typically is going to be your thing of choice if the actual PNG or the albedo itself, in this case is leaf low, so these are just leaves, is referenced. So we do know that this picture is referencing the default sprite map and is at 2K resolution, which is the max resolution that it comes in. We are going to want to duplicate this and create our own. This is to reduce your bundle size so we can compress this ourselves without messing with the vanilla Valheim assets. So custom items, we now have our leaf low 1 here. In max size, we can change this to pretty much any size that is good quality. Most of the time, I will reduce it down to 256, turn on low quality compression, and ramp it all the way to max and click apply. So this applies to our PNG. This does not apply to anything that we've referenced in custom vanilla Valheim. So I'm going to open up my shader here, and for each one that we've attached this to so far, If we just drag this onto the albedo, it's now going to reference our leaf flow that we have set up. So as much as our own custom stuff as we can reference is what we need. We want to fix the way these flames look. This would be changing the colors. As you can see here, you can change this to orange and whatnot. These are the start colors of the flame. And then down here, you're also going to want to change the color of the flame as well. So we're going to turn this to orange. And as you can see, this isn't quite vibrant as well as we want it. There is an emission set to these on the Viking sword itself. So we have a color of the sword, which has a nice emission color and everything that we have set. Same thing with these PNGs. These all reference default vanilla Valheim stuff. You can leave it, but keep in mind, if you change it and you leave this particular shader, anything that you change here will change the vanilla asset. So you are not only editing your sword, you are now editing the vanilla sword because you're editing the vanilla shader. So make sure any changes that you want to make, if you want to use anything that's defaulted to the game, make sure you create a new asset with a new shader and new PNGs. So you're not messing with the vanilla game when your mod is loaded. So for our sake, I'm not going to do that at this moment, at least for this sword, because it's coming in exactly the way I want. I don't plan on messing with that particular shader. So we have the fire warmth. You can change these effect areas. So if you don't want, at least in Valheim, you don't want monsters to be around you when holding this sword, you can change it right here just to no monsters. If you want to troll people, let's say, and have people teleport when they get close to you, you can set that up in code, but you can switch the effect area to teleport. So it'll try and teleport, but the way portals work is it actually scans for each portal with a certain prefab name and then teleports you to the destination with the same name. So this doesn't quite work. You'd have to do some coding for it, but it's a good way to just kind of mess around with stuff. Player base inherently means that enemies will not spawn in your area. So if you wanted a sword that randomly doesn't let enemies spawn anywhere near you, you can switch this to player base and be done. So we're going to leave it on fire in this case. This gives us a slight warmth, gives us some noise and whatnot. So we have sound effects attached. Sound effects in the game use ZFX by default. If you want an actual sound effect to work, ZFX doesn't always synchronize between clients. What you can do is add an audio source and make sure that the audio source is here. The audio mixer group we don't have in an asset rib. You're going to have to do this in code. But for this particular case, all we're going to do is say that our sword is hunky-dory, we like it, right? So we're going to click on the sword iron fire item particle. If you notice, this one's also messed up. I'm going to kind of want to fix this for pretty much every item that we bring into the game. So I'm going to click cutout or click fade. Fade looks more like what the default game one looks like, but sadly this one does not bring in the color. So keep that in mind. But we're going to change this prefab name to test sword tutorial. And we're going to say rename. So we now have a test sword to bring into the game. If you followed us up to this point, you have Asset Bundle Browser and a few other things installed and referenced. So we have the Asset Bundle here. We're going to click New, and just as I said, even if you click in the box and start typing, sometimes it doesn't work, and sadly that's about 98% of the time. So click away, click back on the prefab, click New, click inside the box, and then start typing. We're going to say Test Sword. We're going to keep the naming convention the same. So Test Sword tutorial. And as I mentioned in a previous one, in the item drop script, you can click Alt and click and expand this. We're going to want to quickly change the names so we're not messing with the vanilla Valheim asset. So instead of item sword fire, we're going to say item test underscore sword fire. And the same thing down here, test underscore sword description. These are localized variables, so keep that in mind when it comes into the game, is that that's what we're going to see unless we localize it ourselves. So we've got everything ready. We've got everything set up. We are ready to pretty much bring this into the game, but we need to bundle or use Asset Bundle Browser to bundle this into an asset for us. So Asset Bundle Browser, if we see, we have the test sword tutorial and the test wards that we set up in a previous video. You can see the size on this. This is only 5.9 megabytes, and that's because it's referencing a bunch of sound clips. But you can say build, and we want to guarantee, at least for the first time, that this is a forced rebuild, that it is a fresh asset build, and we're going to click build here. This could take a long time, sometimes up to 5 minutes, depending on what and how much you are trying to reference. All right, so once that builds, we're basically going to be on this particular screen all over again. You're going to close this out, and if you notice, we have an error here that might have caused some issues, but hopefully not. We're going to right click and say show in Explorer. And we're going to jump back to our install and go to asset bundles, standalone windows. And if we see, we actually have test sword tutorial right here with a file. It's actually it's going to come out to be 4 megabytes. So pretty small, but not too bad, considering we kept it very close to vanilla. And we only compressed like one of the PNGs. We didn't compress anything else. So that's a good sign. That means that this is a-okay, that this is ready to go. So I'm going to start a new video where we actually bring this into the game using our Odin Plus mod template with the item manager.